Welcome to episode 5 of the Trinity Tims, hosted this week by myself, Joe McHugh from Video Celts, alongside Eric from Read Celtic and the other James Forrest from Celtic Blog. James has had a little technical issues, but I think he's almost in place now. We know someone that's got a hell of a lot more to deal with than technical issues, but thank you, Philip. You made Christmas very sweet for many of us.
Indeed.
Yep, yo ho ho. It was yo ho ho for the Celts and ha 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 across the city. So just a week ago, there was 6 points between the top two as the Bears counted down their advent calendars. They were going to beat St Mirren, they were going to beat Motherwell, and then they were going to smash Celtic. We've heard it all before. Unfortunately, our side just got on with business. We had a slight hiccup, not a mini wobble, not a crisis, nothing like that at Dundee United, and bounced back with 2 straightforward bread and butter 4-0 victories over Motherwell and St Johnstone. So the good ship Celtic is very much back on course. We've even got all our players back again. That was good to see Alistair Johnson back starting the game and Nicholas Kuhn. It makes some difference seeing those two down the right wing. I am a big fan of Tony Ralston. He's as good a backup right back as we're ever going to get. But Alistair Johnson and Nicholas Kuhn is quite a part. It's almost like Carter Vickers and Ian Other in central defence. When you're alongside Carter Vickers, everyone looks good. And Kuhn and Johnson look fantastic down the right. So that was us back on course, scoring a few goals, most players getting involved. What was your take of the St Johnstone game, Eric?
Pretty comfortable overall, I'd have to say. We didn't look under any sort of pressure in the game at any point. I thought the starting lineup was as close as we're going to get to, fairly full strength, with the exception of Yang. Obviously, Maeda came on a bit later in the game, and he got his goal, which was great. But I mean, I actually thought that Yang put in a good shift. For a change, because we had discussed a couple of weeks back that he wasn't great. There was a lot of energy and a lot of running around the place and a lot of, he did put the work in. There wasn't a whole pile of final product, and I think that's the one thing that's lacking in his game. He still doesn't seem to have that final product. But again, it was great to see Kuhn back. I thought Kuhn had an outstanding game again. He's terrorizing people on the wing this season. He's really got into a really good run of form. So I was delighted with the way he played, but it was good to have Johnston back. And like you said yourself, Ralston, he's looked solid the last couple of games. His crossing ability is definitely not in question. He puts in some great crosses when he gets up that side of the pitch, But overall, it was a pretty comfortable win, I thought. We weren't really tested much by St Johnstone. Could have been more than 4, but pretty much the same sort of a performance. Very, very similar performance to the game against Motherwell as well. Motherwell didn't apply much pressure to us either. So, but from front to back, we were solid. We got the goals. You said in the last pod, when we talked about the Dower draw at Dundee United, you said, what you expected out of the 2 games against Motherwell and St Johnstone was 2 statement wins. I don't think you can get much more of a statement than 2 4-0 wins. We went out there, we did the business, we got the points, and we put ourselves in a really, really strong position heading to Ibrox.
James, that's 2 fairly bland, boring 4-0 victories that myself and Eric have discussed. Can you add some spice? Can you throw something in? Have you got a mini grenade or something that can shock us and get a talking point from those boring 4-0 routine home victories that we all love?
No, this time, no controversy to add this time at all, except to say that I think over the 2 games, Arnie Engels was probably the most impressive player. And a lot of critics have been well and truly silenced on that regard. I also think that the Engels, McGregor, Bernardo midfield particularly impressed me. But against St Johnstone, we left out Callum for the first time in a long time. And I think I cannot be than to say that we did not miss him for the time that he was not on the pitch. That's how good I thought we were. The squad is in a better place than I've ever seen it. We can only screw this up in January. And now that we're back putting the routine wins on the board and racking up the goal difference, I can't wait until Thursday. Can't wait until Thursday. Everybody's firing on all cylinders. It was good to see Kyogo getting a couple of goals because we've all been talking about that. We've been talking about how the strikers maybe only getting on the score sheet enough. It's not that they're not working hard and it's not that they're not doing a lot for the team. But if strikers are going to be judged on goals, then ours need to score a few more. And it was good to see Kyogo getting into double figures. But, you know, you've got Maeda who's on 13, I think. You've got Kuhn who's on 14. So, you know, it's not been a total disaster that the strikers haven't been banging them in every week. But I like to see the strikers getting on the score sheet. And Kyogo's hit form at the right time. Just in time.
Yeah. There's a lot to admire in scrappy goals. And when Kyogo knocked that one in from half an inch out.
With the diving header.
All the way. He scored plenty of great goals for us, and it's good to see any type of goal. And when Ida came on, he had a couple of chances. Ida could easily have had 2 goals, and another day probably would have 2 goals. So we really are in as good a shape as you could wish for going into Sunday, going into Thursday's match. And funnily enough, on the other side of the coin, the exact opposite is the case. They are in one hell of a mess. Their team seems to be getting picked by unknown sports science guys who are getting thrown under the bus week after week by a proper football manager, Phil Clement. It is bonkers what's going on there. We've said for a while that there's none of their players would get into our team. I think Czerny could probably get a place on the bench if he's not suspended for putting his elbow in Tony Watt's face. But there's none of them would be in contention for a place. A push. It's a struggle to see any of them getting on the bench for Celtic. So everything is looking very sweet for Thursday. But we all know we probably thought quite similar going into the League Cup final, and we'll need to have the attitude right. But what's your take on the amusement that's been served up in the last 2 away games from across the city? I'll pass this one to James to begin with. St Mirren and Motherwell, very similar games. They get away with one yesterday against Motherwell. They never get away with it at St Mirren. I think 9 away matches, like 3 wins, 4 defeats and 2 draws, something along those lines. They've got a negative goal difference, and they're at Fortress Ibrox, Loving Cup and all on Thursday. What condition do you reckon our city rivals are in at this minute, James?
It's an utter shambles. And the only surprise is that anyone is surprised. I mean, Keith Jackson this morning, you would have thought that he had been watching the best team in Europe these last few weeks. I mean, I still can't get over the reaction to the cup final. We won the cup final. I've had to constantly check that to make sure that we actually did win. But yeah, well, there it is. It's in black and white. We won the cup final. And I can't believe that they got away with 2 full weeks of crying the blues and the big hard luck story, and we were outdone by referees and all that. This is the kind of stuff that stops you from doing a proper cold-blooded analysis on where your team is and what the problems are with. And for the last couple of weeks, the media has been feeding their fans a constant diet of he's turned the corner, he's got things back on track. They won 4 league games in a row. 4. That's the extent of the comeback. That's the extent of their brilliant run of form. So the only surprise is that anyone is surprised. They are an absolute mess. I thought they were terrible against St Mirren. Absolutely terrible. I thought they had a 20-minute spell where they got the equaliser and looked like they could go on and win the game. And after that, they reverted right back to being as bad as they were in the first half. And St Mirren deservedly won the game. And I was probably the least surprised person in the world watching it. Because, as I said in an article last week, we all know what they are. Their fans know what they are as well. It seems to be that some hacks get carried away when they have a couple of good results and start getting out the confetti and the the ticker tape and planning a title party. I mean, Jackson this morning saying that, they took their eye off the fact that they had 2 games before they played Celtic. They took their eyes off the ball. Most of the media had those games won. They had the gap down to 6 points. For us leaving Ibrox, we were tail between our legs because we'd drawn at Dundee United. I mean, it's ridiculous. The media commentary is part of the problem over there. They feed them supremacist guff week in, week out. And it's no wonder that their fans believe it. But they're a shambles. They're an absolute shambles. The late goal against St Mirren was coming a mile away. You could see it was coming. For him to say that he was surprised by it and he didn't expect it. And he's a moron. A manager should expect that stuff. And he should be prepared for that stuff. And the fact that he's actually confessed that he wasn't should in itself be a sacking offence. Yesterday, they're 2-0 down at half-time. They get a goal back at the start of the second half. But Murray will put the ball in the net another twice before they get the equaliser. Don't even get me started on that, because those decisions are a joke. The so-called foul on Butland is an absolute disgrace. But I see we're not going to get a 2-week-long inquiry into it.
No.
Comes to their decision. You never do when it comes to decisions they get. Never do. Any tight decision. The BBC Sports Scotland last night highlighted it at the very end of the highlights. The very, very end, and Stephen Thompson was like, right, let's move on. That's what you get. That's what you expect, and that's what you get. But they're terrible. They're a mess. It's not just the situation on the pitch. He is an absolute disaster as a coach. For him to have done, for the second week in a row, to have started with one team and then changed it at halftime, just undermines the players that he's put on the pitch completely. And when they're guys who you're going to be depending on, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble if you're constantly undermining your dressing room like that. At the start of the game yesterday, me and my mate were standing talking about it. And I jokingly said to him, how many changes do you think he can afford to make today with Thursday in mind? And he said, well, he doesn't have 11 good players. And I said, he doesn't have 11 good players in reserve like we've got who you can swap for the starting 11. He said, no, he doesn't have 11 good players in that whole squad. So when I heard that he'd made 7 changes yesterday, I thought, they're in a lot of trouble today. They're in a lot of trouble. He's put the noose around his own neck. It's almost as if he wants to get sacked. And some of the comments that he makes after the games are absolutely mind-bending. His comments again yesterday were incredible. For a guy who's seemingly trying to keep his job, he's not doing a whole lot to win hearts and minds. I've never seen them in such a mess. Never seen them in such a mess. And it doesn't matter what happens on Thursday. We'll win this league by a double-digit margin. And if he's still managing at the end of the season, then something has gone very, 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 very badly wrong in their boardroom. They're a shambles. I've never seen a worse shambles. I'm enjoying every minute of it, by the way. I'm enjoying every second of it.
James, I thought they were wonderful against St Mirren. I thought they were absolutely magnificent. And from what I saw yesterday, they were just as fantastic. So you can't get enough of this misery for them. So I'll pass over to Eric for see if you can change the narrative in any way. I probably just went to
Well, for me, it goes back to what James said about the League Cup final. You know, I mean, you would never imagine that we won the League Cup final, but I mean, I touched on it in an article recently there where everything is predicated on assumptions over at Ibrox. And the assumption was that had they got that, penalty that they didn't get, that they would have gone on to win the League Cup final. Now, nobody takes into account that Kasper Schmeichel could have saved that penalty.
No, the angle was quite right. Even if they had scored it, we would have went up the park and scored again. We would have won that game.
Nobody they based this whole assumption that had they got that penalty, they would have won the League Cup final, right? And that's their biggest issue. They just assume. They assumed that St Mirren were going to be a walkover. They assumed that Motherwell were going to be a walkover. Yeah. And they assumed that going into the game against us next Thursday, they were going to be 9 points behind us. Instead, they now find themselves 14 points behind us. And I mean, I'd echo what James says in the fact that they're utterly shambolic at the moment. And I also touched on there about them not having 11 good players to start. Well, you would have thought that considering after losing to St Mirren, yesterday's game was a must-win game to have any hope of even staying alive in this title race, which it isn't a race anymore. So let's just dismiss that. But you would have thought that Clement, this amazing football manager, would have gone out and put his strongest 11 out there.
Yeah.
And Hamza Igamane is their farm player at the moment. That's, we'll say he's banging the goals in since he's got a run in the team in the last few games that he's played. So he came on, he scored 2 goals. That then indicates that he's a guy who you can rely on to actually score some goals for you. And Clement baffled everybody by choosing Cyril Dessers, who's in rotten form at the moment, to start up front against Motherwell. And then he finds himself 2-0 down at halftime. He brings on Igamane. Igamane gets the first and the second to equalise. Obviously, in between that, there was the 2 goals that Motherwell had tonight. So that indicates that he's the guy you got to rely on at the moment. And Vaclav Černý is the other guy who's in form for them, and he starts Kieran Dowell instead of him. Now, none of us 3 are football managers, but I don't know how in God's name that those decisions, when you're going into a game as critical as you are on Thursday, and you have to win the game against Motherwell, I just don't get decisions like that. It makes no sense to me that he would have benched those guys for the start of that game, irrespective of he wanted them to have good legs to start on Thursday against us. He needed to win that game, and in order to win a game, a must-win game, you have to pull out all the stops, and he didn't do that. And that was even commented on the game by the commentary team. And look, Ian Crocker called it as it was. He said that, what would you not have thought after Igamane got his second goal? He said, would you not have thought that Clement would have started Igamane and he would have not had to dig himself out of the hole after half time? But the damage was done. It was too little too late. And that is the story of Clement's career at Ibrox so far. Well, since it's kind of been on the downward spiral, it's been too little too late every time. He's not a proactive manager. He's a reactive manager. That's what he is. He only reacts to situations, and when he reacts to them, it's too late. And what you saw yesterday was a perfect example of it. And we're going to Ibrox. We're not under pressure. Now, obviously, I want to go there and win. I never want anything else from a game against them at Ibrox. I always want to win. But a draw would suit us just fine, because we're still 14 points clear if we draw against them. And the worst case scenario, if we lose, we're only 11. There's still an 11-point gap there. I don't see us losing. I honestly don't see us losing. Even if Igamane starts, even if Černý starts, they're just not good enough. And as James pointed out, in the last 2 games, Engels has really come into his own. And Engels got the man of the match for both games. That speaks for itself. So I reckon Ibrox is this place to shine. I reckon we're going to see a cracking game from Engels on Thursday. But we'll see a cracking game from Callum. We'll see a cracking game from all the guys, because they just are experts at turning it on for games like the one coming up on Thursday. And if we win, that's a 17-point gap. Like James said, it's going to be only a matter of time before we're into double digits and we're pulling away into double digits. So yeah, I'd be more leaning towards what you're saying, Joe, in that I'm really enjoying the way they're playing at the moment. It's fantastic to watch. It's great fun. But yeah, they are in disarray.
They're totally incapable of 90 minutes.
Lineup. I think Kieran Dowell would be lucky to get in our B team, far less the first team squad. The fact he started the game, a must-win game, as you say, Eric. They need to win it. Otherwise, as even Keith Jackson knows, it's utterly redundant turning up at Ibrox on Thursday and trying to get a result if you've blown these last 2 games. So I could not understand his team selection at all. I was absolutely staggered when I found out he changed 7 players. And Kieran Dowell is the central midfielder. I mean, that tells you everything about how impoverished their squad is and the size of the job that they have in front of them. Try to rebuild that into something that can challenge us. I don't think this guy knows where to start. I don't think any of them know where to start. I wouldn't know where to start. If you gave me £100 million, I wouldn't know where to start rebuilding that team of theirs. It's a mess. Kieran Dowell, for God's sake. My God. No one of their fans were raging when they saw the team sheet. One of the worst players where he signed for a top flight club in this country. He would look at a place at a Hearts or an Aberdeen. He wouldn't get in their team. It's dreadful.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's the guy's got nothing to commend him. I think he had a spell at Everton at some point, and there's always a manager that thinks, I'll get the best out of this guy, I'll bring them back, I know what their real power is, what their potential is, and get it. But they're wholly. He started at Everton, then went to Norwich. They're totally incapable of playing for 90 minutes. Fortunately for them, if you play for 20, 25 minutes, you win most games. And that could almost have won them the game yesterday. But over the piece, over 9 games, they've got fantastic home form. I think apart from Kilmarnock and Ross County, apart from them, I think every other home win has been by a single goal. They're playing to form. They're slightly better than the rest of the teams in Scotland, but in a week or two that can be turned round. After Celtic on Thursday, they're away to Hibs. Hibs, you can never, ever trust or rely on Hibs, but you never know. Now and then they might surprise us. And on form, Hibs are in far better form than them. Yeah. But the manager's a joke. I mean, it was 7 points for Beale, 9 points for Van Bronckhorst, and we're talking just now going into the game on Thursday with a 14-point deficit. But they've almost backed themselves into a corner that we can't keep on sacking managers. Well, if you keep on appointing bad managers that don't win,
then you'll keep on sacking them.
So the solution is not sacking bad managers; it's appointing one good manager. But there's similarities with Man United. There is no one in this planet that could go in and no manager could go in and sort Manchester United out. And I doubt there's a manager out there that could sort out the shambles at Ibrox and try and manage the expectations of supporters. The support whipped up by the media, or the media whipped up with the support, is a big part of their problem. They go on a bit nonsense about the heavy jersey and the demands of playing for the club and all this junk. When look at Captain Disappointed, he's been there for 9 years. He's won the same amount as Nicholas Kuhn has in 1 year, but they still trot out the cliches about they've got success and they must win every game. Their success rate in games. I mean, Beale managed to put together some decent runs of victories, but over the piece, from post-COVID, things were teetering under Gerrard. They never get much better under Van Bronckhorst. They're heading the same direction. So you're talking the best part of 4 years where the only bit of form was from under Mickey Beale. So it's a hell of a mess. It's absolutely fantastic. It's something I will never, ever tire of. Watching the shambles and the noise that goes around it, whether it's social media, forums, or old school legacy like Keith Jackson. And our friend Tom English seems to have gone silent. So hopefully Tom's
he popped up the day to make a shit joke about Don Robertson getting the game.
All right, wacky Tom English. Your sides must have been splitting with that. So it's a bit of a mess over there. And that sort of leads us on to one of our issues. Probably about 8-9 places in the Celtic team can be picked just now. There's a decent case for each of the strikers. Ida or Kyogo are both capable of damage. And despite Kyogo's 2 goals yesterday, I think Ida is a better player to start the match. Their central defence is very, very soft. And I think Ida could do more damage, knocking them around, bringing other folk into the game and tucking away chances. So that's my take on it. I would start with Adam Ida and have Kyogo coming on any point between 60 and 70 minutes, and possibly even Kyogo and Ida on at the same time. I'll pass over to Eric. What's your thoughts on who should be leading the line? Would you start with Kyogo or would you start with Adam Ida?
Look, I mean, I've kind of been leaning towards this idea of Kyogo and Ida together. I mean, we saw kind of flashes there in recent games of what might come out of that. I don't think it's probably something we'd experiment with at Ibrox. But I would be very much inclined to agree with you, Joe, starting with Ida. Ida is suited to this kind of game. He's a guy, I think, who could terrorise, and he has terrorised their defence at Ibrox. He proved, he came on as a substitute in the game, the 3-3 draw last season, and he had an immediate impact scoring, and putting us 3-2 up in that game. So he's no fear, and he's certainly not overawed by the occasion as he showed last season. He definitely wasn't. So I just think that, if we start with him, he bangs a goal in. You bring on Kyogo in the usual 60-minute mark, he'll come on and he'll terrorise the defence as well and probably score a goal too. I suppose I'm touching as well on the point that James made that, they don't score much more than one goal at home. And we definitely have more than one goal in us, in terms of our ability to score goals, as we've proved categorically in the last 2 games. We've more than one goal in us in a game. Now, obviously, a fired-up Ibrox side is going to be a different proposition to what, Motherwell and St Johnstone were. But at the same time, I believe that we should start with Ida, because Ida, he has a goal or 2 in him, and Kyogo then to come on later would definitely have a goal in him as well. It depends very much. I mean, they started with Sterling and Proper in defence yesterday, which was, torn apart in the first half really by Motherwell. So, what does he do this time around? Does he start with Proper and
there's no other options.
You got Balogun injured at the moment?
Yep, Balogun got injured in the first half at St Mirren. Yep. Leon King still basking in the glory of his Champions League run a couple of years ago. There's no other options.
Well, he has to go with Dusan Sterling so and Proper, yeah.
So that's it.
If you look at is it Maswen Hise, his goal was a thing of beauty, and the way he turned those guys inside out. I'd imagine Brendan Rodgers is looking at that and he's literally just rubbing his hands and saying, if these guys can do that to them, can you imagine what we're going to do to them if we actually turn the screw on them on Thursday? You know what I mean? So I'd say he's relishing this. He's absolutely relishing this, because he's going to pull out his strongest level. We're going there with the only casualty we have at the moment is James Forrest, who would be a good impact sub late in a game like that. But, the thing is, does he start, with Maeda, Ida, and Kuhn in up front, and then you see that leaves you with Yang to come on at some point to take over from Kuhn, or would you stick with Kuhn throughout the whole game? Is his fitness levels at a level where he'll last the full 90? I don't know about that, but I just don't. We need to have the game put to bed if Yang's coming on. Put it that way, So yeah, I think Brendan Rodgers is absolutely spoiled for choice by the loss of Forrest, and I think he's really going to be relishing this. Really.
I'll throw that over to you, James. By your facial expressions, I think you're still in the Kyogo camp. We will have Maeda on the left. We will have Kuhn on the right. And would you start with Kyogo ahead of Ida?
Well, this is interesting because I wrote that last week. But Rodgers is going to be able to predict the most important variable here, which is what Baldermont might do across the city. He probably needs to win the game, retain even a shred of credibility. And they're playing at home in front of a 100% partisan crowd. So how does he line up? How does he play against us? Does he try and attack for the start? Does he try and field a team that is going to try and hurt us straight away? Or does he sit back and play a more defensive game, try and hit us on the break or whatever, right? So that how we play is going to depend on how they play to an extent. Rodgers will prepare for both scenarios, but that might actually influence who we play up front. Because if they're going to come out, then as you say, you saw what Motherwell players did to them yesterday, right? If Kyogo gets that kind of space, forget about it. Game's over. Game's done. But if they play a tighter, more compact shape, then Kyogo might not have a lot of room to manoeuvre, and that's where Ida might be a better bet, because Ida's more physical, he's more aggressive. So I don't know. Rodgers will make a decision based on how he thinks they're going to play. I would still play Kyogo because Kyogo's not going to be the only goal threat, of course. I think whoever we play, their defence is going to have more than it can handle. Right? With the three players that we've got up front, Maeda marauding on the left and Kun marauding on the right, doesn't really matter who we've got in the middle because we're going to do damage anyway, regardless. And the idea of Kyogo or Adam Maeda playing against Robin proper should fill us all with a great deal of pleasure and joy. And
that's the thing, James. I mean,
terror and nightmares. He might be one of the worst central defenders I've ever watched in an Ibrox jersey. He is awful, and he talks like a guy who's scared to death every time he goes on the pitch. This is the second major interview he's gave where he's talked about how overwhelmed he sometimes feels by the pace and the aggressiveness in Scottish football. I don't know what he expected when he signed. I don't know if he was one of the players who viewed Scottish football from afar as being a bit of a holiday camp where you could just come and pass the ball about and basically top up your pension pot. He's got the shock of his life so far. And that is only going to get worse on Thursday because he is not remotely equipped for a battle like he's going to need to fight if his team are going to get in and out of the game. And whoever he plays alongside him, Sterling, I've seen Sterling play in about 5 or 6 different positions yet, and I still couldn't tell you what his best one is because I don't think he stands out anywhere on the pitch that he plays. I mean, he'll certainly play central defence, which means that Tavernier, Captain Disappointment himself, will be playing on the right. But his entire game is about getting forward because he can't defend worth a damn. I mean, you saw how he got absolutely turned inside out for Motherwell's second goal. I mean, it's not even Proper's position that's worse. It's Tavernier getting absolutely dummied by that guy when he turned with the ball. I mean, Tavernier was all at sea, and that's Tavernier summed up. He's a dreadful defender. And we force them to play him further back than he would normally play because if he plays too far up the pitch, Maeda's just going to roast him for the whole afternoon.
And the other thing with Tavernier is he's a yard off the pace now at the moment. As well.
I think if they're going to get anything out of the game, they're going to need to get all the front guys playing at their absolute best. And that means utilising Tavernier as an attacking player rather than as a defensive one. But if they do that, they're just going to get destroyed. So it depends. I would still go with Kyogo because Kyogo is that guy who's got that extra second of sharpness and that extra wee bit of imagination that will do the completely unexpected. And Christ almighty, as Malcolm Tucker says in one of his famous rants, you can't even cope with thinking the thinkable, let alone the unthinkable, and that's their defence to a T. They can't even handle the expected, let alone the unexpected. So I don't think we get any chance regardless of who we play. But depending on how they set their team up, Rodgers might decide to go with either. But I don't know. I doubt it myself because Kyogo scoring 2 yesterday means that he's found his shooting boots again. I can't see any real case for leaving him out.
Eric, you were looking to come in?
I suppose I just wanted to echo what James was saying about Robin Proper, but that's why I feel that if Ida starts, Ida is the kind of guy who could really bully Proper, because Proper is like, as we pointed out, he was turned inside out, by Masson Hiswe in there. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. Like that guy made the Ibrox defense look inept, and I think Ida he's the kind of player who has the strength to bully Proper. Physically, he's a better, he's a better proposition in coming up against a very weak defense, which it is, and that's what I think will be Brendan Rodgers' viewpoint, that Ida could do a job because this defense is going to be very weak. But alternatively, James is right in what he's saying. Like, if Kyogo's on form on the day, he will turn them inside out, and he will if he's in any bit of space and he gets decent service, he will absolutely tear them asunder. So it's an embarrassment of riches, I suppose, if you want to look at it from that perspective. It just boils down to what kind of a decision that Rodgers is going to make. But on the day, I just see Maeda is going to torment. He's absolutely going to torment Tavernier as he always does. And as James said, if they try to deploy Tavernier in an attacking role, he is really a yard off the pace now because he's pushing on in age, and that's just Maeda has always tormented him, and he will do the same again. I have no doubt on Thursday. He'll make a fool of him, because the pace that Maeda has is just off the scale. So it's actually. You see, they're just like a sieve across the board. There's holes everywhere that we can just take advantage of and tear asunder. There's literally gaps and holes everywhere in their squad that we will just. It could be a serious embarrassment for Clermont, and I'm not being overly optimistic in saying that, but. As James said, they have to start with Igamane because he's the on-form guy at the moment. But I mean, even if he doesn't, if he doesn't show up on the day, what have they got in the back in reserve? Nothing, literally nothing. So, yeah, it just does not look like there's much hope for them.
I think we can all agree. Ida and Kyoko have important roles to play. Depends who starts, but both of them will have an impact. Both will be heavily involved, but it's looking as good as it can get, and that's about the only issue or concern that I have. There's been a few occasions when you thought that this can't get much better, but the perspective for this game is turned around in the course of a week. A week ago, they were full of life's joys and on the march again. They're on the march again in a different way. They're retreating, and I think their mindset. You can make a case for either way. The crowd is going to be baying for blood, preferably our blood to begin with. But if they don't get our blood in the first 10, 15 minutes, they'll be going for the blood of their own heroes. Phil Clement's young team.
You hear a pin drop.
Yeah, it's vital that we hold firm in the first 10, 15 minutes. If we can impose ourselves in the first 10, 15 minutes, that'll accelerate their lack of patience. Their lack of patience could be down to about 7 or 8 minutes. So will be very well briefed, but they won't know what to do. Do they throw everything at Celtic? They try and hit Celtic early on, or they try and get a foothold in the game, keep Celtic at bay, and try and build some confidence as the game develops. But Tav will barely cross the halfway line. If he's crossing the halfway line and Maeda's in behind him, well, I'm picturing it just now in the first half. We're playing towards the Copeland Road stand. Tav's wandering up looking for glory down the right wing, and Maeda's got the whole of the left flank in front of the Govan stand to himself as he zooms in Super Jack Butland. So I have no idea how they play. I don't think they can successfully play anyway. They might have a good 15 or they will have a good 15 or a decent 15, 20 minute spell. But the start of the game is going to be very important. And I think next couple of days, Brendan Rodgers will be absolutely in his element at Lennoxtown. He'll be very, very assured. I was going to say confident. He'll be very assured. He's got most of his players coming into a bit of form. Kuhn and Johnson on the right. Engels is looking more like the player that we signed. He did have a mini wobble, if you're watching, Keith. It wasn't a crisis, but he's back. Arnie is back. He had 2 good games against Motherwell and St Johnstone. He's in form. He'll know the importance of this game. He was the youngest guy in the pitch and popped up at the cup final at the opponent's end and tucked away a penalty when he hadn't been having a good game. He wasn't in good form. So he'll be full of life's joys going for this. All the players will be looking forward to it. And the first 10, 15 minutes, there could be danger. But if it's nothing each after 10, 15 minutes, things will be swinging dramatically our way. So how do you see them setting up, James? Will they go gung-ho and try and hammer Celtic in the first 10, 15 minutes? Or will the handbrake be on and will be parking the bus to try and settle into the match?
I think that will be a very dangerous tactic if they try and hit us early. Because the image you just conjured up, a Tavernier beyond the halfway line getting caught by Maeda, that's bad enough, right? But even if Maeda's no bearing down on goal, you've got one of the two central defenders who then has to cut out wide to try and stop Maeda from bearing in on goal. And that's where Kyogo's going to get the space to really do them damage. And so I think if they come out of the traps to try and get an early goal, I think that will leave them wide open. And I think we could be the ones to score the early goal. We're pretty good at scoring early goals at Ibrox in the last few years. We've been fairly good at it. And I can see that happening all over again in a very long afternoon for the man on the touchline, with all those fans behind him in the stands screaming for, as you say, not our blood but his. Could be a very long afternoon if they try that.
I'm going to cross my fingers here, and now that you mentioned Maeda and early goals, the first match of 2022, Celtic against Hibs, Maeda's debut, he scored in the first 10 minutes. The first match of 2023, he scored. I'm trying to mind the game now. The first match of 2024, he scored against St Mirren. I think we were 2-0 after 10 minutes. This annoying me. Obviously not prepared for this, but Maeda scored the first goal of, it was at Ibrox again, the two each match.
That was an early one as well.
Morelos cut inside, played the ball across. Maeda took the ball away from Tavernier, danced past Connor Golson and popped it away in the first 5 minutes. 2022, 2023 and 2024, Dyson Maeda has been first footing for Celtic. And so that's quite an enticing prospect. I checked the bookmakers this morning and I found that you can get Celtic at 5-4 for anyone that's inclined to put a bet on. Don't get greedy. Don't go for glory with handicap bets. 5-4 seems pretty decent value. But after that interruption, I'll pass over to Eric for his thoughts on the game. Do they throw everything at us, or do they hold back and try and stay in the match for as long as possible?
Well, for starters, they're going to be writing off the clan-based songbook, to begin with, and they'll be up for it for the first 10 minutes, as both you guys have kind of indicated. So yeah, they will. I feel they have no choice but to come out and go for it from the get-go. Their hope will be that they'll score an early goal and they'll put us on the back foot as a result of that, or we'll start feeling the pressure if they do that. But it's like James and both yourself and James have kind of talked about Maeda, but I mean, you've also got Kuhn on the other side up against Ridvan Yilmaz if Yilmaz starts there. Now, like, I've been watching Kuhn in the last few games, since he came back from injury. This move that he has where he cuts inside, everybody is standing off him. Everybody's standing off him, and they're terrified of him, right? And he took an almost carbon copy shot yesterday, which was saved by the St. Johnstone keeper, Ray, which was a decent save, to be fair. But when he cuts inside and he puts the ball onto that left foot, he can do serious damage. So he almost did it yesterday, but I can see him having massive joy against the likes of Yilmaz in the Ibrox defence and cutting inside and having pot shots. I think he's going to flourish in a game like that. So that kind of the threat that we have, both left and right, is phenomenal. And so going back to what you asked me in the first question is are they going to? They have no choice but to go for it. This is, without putting too fine a point on it, shit or bust. It is. So they have to throw everything at this in the hopes that they're going to get something out of it. Because even if they manage to win, there's still a huge gap there. So this is all about now saving face and ultimately Clement saving himself. Because I honestly can't see how he survives this if they lose. I can't. It just there was a turn in, what would you say, in the attitude towards him after the way they played in the cup final. Any goodwill that came out of that is gone now after the two games that they just had. If you heard the Ibrox crowd, the away fans yesterday, everything they did was booed. So, like you've said, Joe, we have to ride out this first 10 minutes. If we ride that out, and then we go and get, even if we get a goal in the first 10 minutes, that's going to completely throw the spanner in the works for them. But let's just say we don't, and we ride out the first 10 minutes. And then we just start to pick them off. Crowd is going to go quiet. As I said, you'll hear a pin drop. And then not only are they going to go quiet, they're going to start turning, and they'll turn on their own. And, look, Captain Disappointed has discussed that, in the match programs recently, back pre-COVID. He discussed about, them applying too much pressure to them. So that's where we're going to see it. If they don't start getting the end result that they want, in goals, we're going to see the pressure being applied by the home crowd. And that's something they just tend to, they absolutely collapse under that kind of pressure. And, we could be looking at a game where if we go 2 or 3 up, stands will be empty by the 65th minute. And that they'll vote with their feet, and they'll basically show the Ibrox board what they think of Clement. The thing is, and I wanted to touch on this earlier, they're caught between a rock and a hard place here. They can't afford to pay him off. If they pay him off, whoever comes in, like if there is any transfer kitty there at all, I don't know how much they're going to actually provide for Clement if he does survive to buy players or to bring players in on loan. But the fact of the matter is, like if they let him go, they have to pay him out for the rest of his contract. That's going to cost them millions. It's just weakening them further. So they're literally, this is a catch-22. They're completely caught between a rock and a hard place. Do they appease the fans, or do they continue with what Clement is building? Because he's apparently building something, but it's something akin to O'Reilly's Wall and Faulty Towers. I think that's probably the best.
Nice analogy, mate. That's a very nice analogy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's this game is again, excuse the language, it's shit or bust for them, and they have to throw everything at us. But are they capable of actually breaking us down? Are they capable? Is Igaman is their biggest threat? Is he capable of breaking us down? He was fairly anonymous in the cup, the League Cup final. So I don't know. You see the kind of guy that they'll rely on. But I just, like you said earlier, I think Rodgers is going to be having a fine all time of it in Lennoxtown in the next few days. And the team talk.
I think Clement is now getting close to territory. They can't afford to keep him. For a while, it's been they can't afford to sack him.
Yeah,
but
there's the point, Joe. There's the point.
If they don't win on Thursday, then I think you're knocking about 10,000, 15,000 off their crowds, and they'll tell you that they're all paying with season tickets. But playing in front of 30,000, there's knock-on effects left, right, and centre. Hospitality, as John Brown would say, used by the pies, used by the programmes. They're all going to be hitting, slumping, and they're generally pretty good at coming up with a card for season ticket renewals. But if they've allowed Clement to hang around, the crowd's down to 30,000. Folk will realise you do not need to buy a season ticket to get anywhere near the game. You can pick up tickets for any matches. And B, there's very little inclination. Next season, they could be looking at Celtic going for title 56. That should boost membership numbers at golf clubs and bowling clubs and whatever else across Scotland.
Well, what's going to be the slogan? # stopping the 56.
Well, they've got a new communications guy coming in, some clown that used to be at the SFA, Greg Mailer. So he'll be looking up some. I had some minor dealings with him when he was at the SFA, and it's no surprise where he's ended up with his next job. They're in a hell of a mess, but it is up to us, and there's no one I would trust more than Brendan Rodgers to go to Ibrox and inflict some greater pain on them. He's been planning this game he's probably been planning for this match since the cup final. The team was forced on him at Dundee United. Most of them were coming back. Most of them, basically everyone, unfortunately, the other James Forrest is out, but against Motherwell and St Johnstone, everyone's had a run. It's not been too strenuous for them. And the players will know that the squad rotation has been with an eye to Ibrox. We'll be fielding your strongest team on Thursday. and they'll be very well briefed. They had a fairly relaxing game against St Johnstone. I thought Callum McGregor might get the whole game off, but he must have been itching to go on for a 20-minute stretching of his legs. So McGregor came on. There's been no reports of injuries. They're all in a very good condition. They seem to be in a good place. And as I say, Rodgers is the guy you would trust most of all to see this through and come away with the result that we're all hoping for. Have you get any more thoughts on either what myself or Eric's come up with in the occurred to you, James?
Well, something has occurred to me. If they'd been able to do what everybody in the mainstream media presumed they were going to do, which is get the 6 points in the last 2 games, I think his job would be a lot more straightforward going into this game. He'd have been able to choose his tactical approach more carefully. He'd have been able to play a much more careful game. But Eric is actually right. I think Eric is actually right, and I think that's how it's going to go. I think his mind's been made up for him to a certain extent. I think the choice has been made for him by those results, and I don't think they can afford to do anything other than try and win the game. And as you can see, I've screwed the camera up again.
Other way,
right? Okay.
Ken, one point as well. How are we feeling about the referee on the day?
I mean, it really doesn't matter because it's a lot of bad options, and I don't know, least worst option maybe.
Well,
I'm very wary of them all, and Don Robertson is the last word in leniency. Other referees, they've mastered the art of breaking our play by just the way they break play up, giving us free kicks that we're not looking for, and opponents can collapse. Robertson lets guys away with absolute murder. I won't forget Angie's first season up at Tannadice. A guy Butcher's challenge on David Turnbull's an absolute outrage. He get booked for it, and retrospectively get a red card, which was no use to Celtic or to David Turnbull. And then a couple of weeks later, just after Maeda had joined, Maeda had played against Hibs in midweek. We were at Alloa on the Saturday Scottish Cup tie. Barry Ferguson and Bob Malcolm were in charge, and Ideguchi's Celtic career was over before it started. There was various assaults taking place in that match. The one in Ideguchi was probably the worst. Don Robertson forced himself into issuing a yellow card. It was upgraded to a red, and there's quite a pattern with Robertson. He allows almost anything to go. So we'll see if there's an early card. I suspect not. There'll be some meaty challenges going in early on. To be honest, they don't really have many dirty players. It's another area that they're lacking in. They don't really have someone that can put the boot in. But
he's best to needle and wind people up.
Compared to some of the butchers that they've had down the years, Raskin is a non-event. Eric, you seem to be in the camp that the least bad option, Don Robertson and Nick Walsh.
Well, not so much Don Robertson. I agree with what you're saying about Robertson, and that he just anything goes with him, and he lets guys get away with murder in games, But I've always said, and I've always been of the opinion, and I said this to you, Joe, recently, like in the last year and a half, Walsh has shown himself as the best of a bad lot. He's definitely one of the more consistent referees out there, and the fact that we have him on VAR. Yes, in the game last season, he did he did call back the Silva decision, and he, when Beaton gave the yellow card, he did overturn that and give a penalty, which was sort of mind-boggling. But at the same time, the Iwata foul was called back as well. I don't know whether he was doing the Silva thing to even things out, as sometimes we suspect happens. But at the same time, I think if Robertson is letting things, if he's too lenient and he's letting things go, I think Wall should be the kind of guy who will call it back. He won't be afraid to call decisions back. He won't be afraid to relook at things that Robertson will let go. whether that works in our favour or against us remains to be seen. Because as you alluded to earlier on, they don't really have any hard men. So who's going to go flying in tackles? In the game, and again, they have to throw everything at it, but they just don't have a physical leader on the pitch, or those boys with balls, as Barry Ferguson always loves referring to every article that he writes in the record. So I thought Beaton would have some involvement. I thought maybe Beaton would be the VAR, and then maybe Walsh would be the ref. But Don Robertson seems to be, it's a bit of a surprise to me, but at the same time, not one that I'd be overly worried about. How would you feel about that, guys?
James, your thoughts on Don Robertson?
Well, as I said, you've made some good points, Joe. I mean, he's one of those guys who's going to pretty much let them away with trying to kick us off the park. But then I fully expected that anyway. It's one of those games where they're going to resort to every measure that they can in order to get something from the game. And I don't think there are many referees in Scotland who would be terribly inclined to put a stop to it, especially not at Ibrox. And I want to raise a point that's unrelated to that in terms of Ibrox. And it's to say that I hope that our security guys are on the ball on the day, because the atmosphere over there is ugly anyway at the best of times, and these are definitely not the best of times. There's also this thing with the 3 o'clock kickoff. I really don't know what has inspired the 3 o'clock kickoff, but having their fans drinking all morning and much of the afternoon, turning up at that game and whatever bad mood they're already going to be in, and the prospect of a Celtic win on top of that, and such a wide margin at the top of the league, I think it's a recipe for disaster. And I just hope that it goes without incident. But I have got to say, the more I think about it, the more concerned I am about it.
It's rare it does go without incident.
Yep, I agree
with all
you.
the ingredients for really something really bad to happen.
Yep, I agree with you. The ingredients are all there for something particularly nasty. I
think so.
I mean, a 12:30 kickoff. That was when the Celtic physio got struck with a bottle at half time, and when the CCTV was mysteriously switched off, and Michael Nicholson, Celtic CEO, bought that excuse. And both of you guys have been to football matches for a long time. If a bottle lands in the pitch, I've not the Rapid Vienna game, but I have very rarely seen a bottle thrown onto a football park. It's a long, long time since it happened. And if a bottle was thrown on the park, there'd be a gasp from the crowd. People would notice it. So we are told to believe that in April 2022, a bottle mysteriously was thrown onto the park, which nobody noticed until Joe Hart appeared for the second half and noticed broken glass in his goal mouth. That did not happen. There were grounds people on the pitch at half time sorting out the penalty area, and for one reason or another, glass suddenly appeared there. You don't need to be an expert to put the jigsaw together, but there was real prospects of harm. There was Celtic supporters at that match. There was the 800 in that corner. I mean, for some reason, I've got images of James McCarthy was lapping it up at the full-time whistle as coffee cups and other things were thrown at him. But I think it's great news that there's no Celtic supporters at the match. They've had a tough time at Ibrox in recent seasons. There's been 800 squeezed in there. It's going to be particularly toxic, and some guys love it. Some guys see it as a battle honour. I went to Ibrox, but I don't think you're missing much this coming Thursday. And Celtic really ought to be on top of everything pre-match to make sure there's adequate stewarding. That Michael Nicholson, if you're watching, check the CCTV. Make sure there's a backup for the CCTV, and make sure there's a backup for the backup CCTV. There should be plenty of stewards, plenty of police at the match, and if I was in charge, I'd have Celtic security personnel in the dugout or around the dugout in plain clothes.
I agree more, mate.
Just to be certain. But it's great news that there's no Celtic supporters going to the game. Whatever kicks off, whatever goes off, it's 100% on that lot. So you get anything to add on the security front, Eric, before we head towards our final feature of Twat of the Week?
Well, I mean, I suppose we look at 2 years ago as well, didn't they? There was bags of weapons found. You know, obviously, was it machetes and baseball bats and hammers were found there? You know, obviously, they were the Ibrox fans were trying to smuggle them in to do serious damage to Celtic fans. So that would, 100%. It's great that Celtic fans aren't there. They're not going to be there, and if anything happens, it's 100% on the Ibrox fans, and that augurs very well for us. But going back to your point about the glass, a bottle doesn't break when it's thrown onto grass. So somebody had to shatter that and then deposit it on the pitch. So, you know, the mystery of the broken glass is never going to be solved because of the CCTV disappearing. But you don't unless whoever threw it whacked it off the goalpost and it broke onto the pitch. You want to be a good shot though at the same time. But yeah, I mean, security wise, the biggest concern we have is our own staff. You know.
Yeah.
And as we saw back in April of 2022, you know, there's nobody safe. I mean, a Celtic physio got a bottle across the head. There's no reason that these guys, when they're, as James put it, drinking all morning long before the game, you know, boozed up to the gills and baying for blood, that there is you know, it's the possibility that a few of them are going to go out of control. That's not, you know, it's not strange that could happen. Like, you know, it's not, you know, it's, to me, it is a scary prospect of them being totally booze fueled, buck fast coming into the ground. And I mean, we've known that the Ibrox security is lenient in what it allows into the ground anyway at the best times. So, you know, I would be fearful for the safety of our staff. Yeah, if things get ugly, and there's a very distinct chance that things could get ugly there on Thursday.
Well, the guy that was convicted of throwing the glass was a corporate guest, so that tells you the caliber of them. It's not just the run of the mill from follow. It's the well-heeled, white-collar bear that goes into hospitality. He's equally as capable of carrying that out. So I think that's been fairly well covered. We've got so much content, so many options for Twat of the Week. I'm going to have third choice, but I don't think it's going to be too difficult. So heads or tails, I'll head over to James for your Twat of the Week. Which clown banging the drum for Matters Ibrox has amused you most over the last week, James?
Well, he almost got a pass this morning because he held up his hands and admitted that he was a twat. But Keith Jackson still gets it for the title race is back on. There's no question that he deserves it. I mean, as I say, he did a mea culpa this morning. And I wrote an article about it earlier. And I said that it's something that his Sunday Mail buddy would never have done and never has done. When he gets something like that completely and utterly wrong, he just pretends that it never happened and moves on to the next stupid prediction. But Jackson always held his hands up this morning and said, yeah, we didn't answer that one. Still, you're a twat. What can I tell you? But you don't already know, Keith. You're a twat.
Right, that's Keith ticked off the list. Who's your Twat of the Week, Eric?
I think Neil McCann for his co-commentary yesterday, which was shocking.
Neil McCann.
I think the only...
What did he say?
I was just listening to him. I mean, he was trying his ultimate best to be, how would you say, impartial. And you could hear the pain.
Must have been amusing when it's going.
You could literally hear the pain in his voice when Mas Van Heese scored that goal, and giving the credit that he was, you could actually feel the pain in his voice when he was saying that, you know. So yeah, he tried there. I suppose there was once upon a time when he'd never be impartial. He was just pro Ibrox. But
yeah,
it's actually more pathetic to watch him try and be an impartial. And he had no choice but to actually try and praise Motherwell in the first half of that game. But you could feel and hear the strain in his voice when he was. So yeah, I mean, just listening to him, it was luscious to listen to. But at the same time, for me, he's my Twat of the Week because he was just so much fun to listen to yesterday, and to hear the pain in his voice when they were 2-0 down at halftime.
A classic from McCann yesterday when Czerny put his elbow into Tony Watt's face. Czerny was actually protecting his own face.
Yes.
So
yeah.
If you see somebody suddenly throw up their elbow in the direction of an opponent, what it actually is they're only protecting their face. So well done, Neil McCann. I'll go with Boyd. Boyd was in great form again. It's great. Whenever the result goes against him, all you hear is Boyd's voice going up higher and higher and higher. He's yelping like a schoolgirl by the end of it. And it's very predictable. We've seen it many times before, but after every away defeat, Boyd just goes completely off it. To be fair, he's not as much of a cheerleader as Barry Ferguson and a few others. I don't think he's really taken to Clement at all. But he's got a good friend called Alec Ray, and I think he would love to see wee Alec getting the brogues and blazer, even for a couple of games. But Boyd is great value. It was a bit frustrating. Chris Sutton was otherwise engaged. He was covering English football yesterday, so they had Neil McCann on co-commentary, and James McFadden was quite good at winding Boyd up. He was just laughing away after the match. But Boyd barely needs a question. You can just throw anything at Boyd and he goes off in one. The opponents barely get a mention. He just goes through all the problems at his beloved tribute act, and it's wonderful to see. So we'll wind up for now. Hopefully Boyd and others will be having a meltdown at some stage on Thursday. But this is
Alec will be returning to his role as the Undertaker.
This is our fifth and last show of 2024. Hopefully there'll be plenty of content continuing in 2025, and we start the year off in fine form at Ibrox. But win, lose or draw, I suspect it will be title 55 for Celtic coming up. So I'll leave it for now, and we'll catch up again at some point in the near future, guys.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Happy New Year. Talk to you later.
Happy New Year all when it comes.
Bye-bye.